relief. We heard them prior to being in the auditorium, and I think there was a lot of anticipation and anxiety surrounding what they might be, who they're directed to. And, you know, as Indigenous people, we've lost hope in the justice system and in other systems that affect our everyday life. But when we sat down with Blaine and we heard them, it brought such relief. We can't speak for everybody, but I felt blown away by all the considerations that was put into it. It's not perfect recommendations, but it's practical, and you know, this inquest brought us together to seek truth and share truth together. And at the end of the day, I think there's comfort in this inquest and the recommendations that are going to be implemented.
If you want to add anything to that.
I share a lot of Chelsea's thoughts too about what happened, the recommendations, and there was a lot of good recommendations for sure. The jury heard and were attentive, and they gave good recommendations, and that's kind of what I was hoping for, that the jury would respond in a good way, in a respectful way, and also to respond to us as Native people. You know, it was huge that we were treated with respect throughout the whole process here. A lot of our culture, our ceremonies were followed. And even the reporters here, a lot of times they come and ask me for an interview. I was giving tobacco, which is huge in our culture. So, you know, I felt respected, and I felt that we had some good recommendations. And now it's just a waiting game to see if any or all of the recommendations will be followed.
One of the things that you mentioned, all of you, that you wanted was to have intergenerational trauma addressed and focused on. I know that there are 29 points here to remember, but was there any recommendation that really stuck? Did anything stand out to you that really thought, you know what, that's going to help?
Well, I'm going to start. When we were in the room there with Blaine, it's one of the things that I said. Like, it was noticeable by its absence. They didn't touch on that at all. None of the recommendations went onto the residential school and the impacts. And for me, that was really noticeable. Mm-hmm. And if you look at our history and everything that happens to our Native people, it all stems from the residential school. I talked about the anger that our young people feel. They feel that anger, but they don't know where it comes from. And if you don't know where it comes from, how can you correct it? Like Miles was an angry man. He was an angry person. He didn't know where his anger came from. If you didn't know where it came from, how could you correct it? And that goes for the majority of our youth out there, the majority of the people that are incarcerated, the majority of our homeless people, the majority of our people that are struggling with addictions. I lost two granddaughters to the murder, and the murder and missing Indigenous women is huge in my heart. And they had a lot of anger to put themselves into that situation where they were murdered. So for it not to be addressed, it's huge to me. But hopefully, with all the reporters here and all the everyone hearing us around the world, maybe we are going to raise awareness on that. And if that's the only thing to come out of here is to raise awareness, well, it's a good thing. If you raise awareness, then everybody's going to identify, you know what, there is a problem.
I agree with Daryl here too, because my parents went to residential school, and I also went to residential school, and Bonnie also went to residential school, and I agree there's nothing in there for recommendations. And also I'm disappointed with nothing for the parole board. Well, there should have been some couple recommendations for them.
Can you say that closer to the mic, buddy? Sorry, I'm thinking of that.
I'm sorry.
What did you want recommendations for?
I wanted recommendations for what is Daryl collaborating to, like, there's nothing for residential school, so, you know, training, like what Daryl was saying, and then probably towards the parole board, there was nothing for them, no recommendation for nothing. I don't know why that is, or, but yeah, but every all that, it's all good though, recommendations.
I think this inquest took us through a roller coaster. I think back to the days where they spoke about the autopsies, and hearing them created a lot of anger and frustration within us, and question how could somebody do this. But then when it got to witness testimonies such as the elders and the parole officers who had a rapport with Miles, and they spoke about the good man he was, and the engaged offender that he was, and the program that he tried to stay active in. And that brought more empathy to me as a community member. And it just reminded me that we need to stay neutral, but as Indigenous people, we are always forgiving people. We will always be forgiving to our people and to the rest of society.
I wanted to know your thoughts on one of the recommendations that stood out to me based on one of your questions was to have a person while in Correction Services Canada stay with the offender throughout their incarceration as well as release. And I felt like that came directly from questions that were asked by families during the inquest. So, do you feel that your questions were heard?
Absolutely. I think Daryl could probably speak to it a little bit more, but he definitely pushed that how the story of the offenders loses its meaning over time when you continue to talk to multiple people about it. And so it is important to us that we keep that rapport. You can't measure success in anything that you do if you're not consistently seeing the same support people in your life.
Some of the recommendations are addressed to the leader of the James Smith Cree Nation. What do you think about those recommendations? Like more communication with the RCMP, call for to denounce the crimes, some stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think we're grateful for all the recommendations. No system is perfect, and it showed that every system needed a recommendation. Every system needs change, and that includes our systems and our people. And what more do you want to say about leadership? Our leader, all of today's Indigenous leaders themselves are impacted by generational trauma, and we haven't begun to see the shift in the generations that have pursued the education and the experience to be in those roles. And when that time comes, our communities will look a little differently.
Each of you lost someone really important, multiple people really important to you. And Daryl, you said this, I think last week, that you don't want this to mean nothing. Like, you want something positive to come from this. How are you feeling now? I'd like to hear from each of you about how you're feeling, if this means anything at this point. This inquest.
I think it means a whole lot. And you're right, that's my sister here, she was a beautiful woman. And our community lost a lot of good people, They left a huge impact in their community. And for them to lose their lives in nothing, come out of it, didn't seem right. It's not right. So if my sister's death means that something positive is going to come out of this, then her legacy is going to live on. Our community needed some changes for a long time. And not just our community, every community across Canada, across our world, is dealing with the same impacts that we are dealing with in our community. So for these people to lose their lives and create awareness across the world, it's huge for us as Native people. There's a lot of people out there that are learning a lot about our way of life. They're learning about the issues that we are facing. They're learning about the oppression that we faced since Christopher Columbus discovered America. The oppression brought on by the treaties, the oppression brought on by the justice system, the welfare system, the schooling system. Every day of our lives, we've dealt with that oppression. And in our community, that oppression creates lateral violence. So for the awareness to happen, not only in the European society, but in ours, there was a lot of recommendations directed to our people. So now we have to go back and start addressing that in our own. And that's the only thing we can control. The only environment we can control is ours. We have to start addressing it in our community. Address that lateral violence. Address that oppression. Give our people some voice. Let our youth speak up, our elders. So yeah, my sister, Jonesy and Bonnie, they didn't die for nothing.
Do you feel that way, Bud?
Yep, I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel happy that there's good recommendations there, positive. Like I said, just helped me sleep at night since this inquest started. Like getting up in the middle of the night, crying and wondering all of that, and the news and whatnot, you know. And yeah, I feel better now. Like weight lifted off of my shoulders, but you know, like there's still a couple more recommendations I would like to see. But I'm happy. Like at least they got honored. Yeah, thank you.
Bonnie had a heart of gold. Bonnie was a foster mom, and Bonnie welcomed people into her home and helped them with whatever means she had. She didn't turn any people away, and a lot of those people who entered her home were people struggling with mental health and addictions, and Buggy and Bonnie's home became a safe place for many community members. And it's a huge loss to our community. Everyone is a huge loss to our community. But again, we appreciate this inquest and that it can take us to a road forward. Being here at this inquest and our community members having conversations with the RCMP, having conversations with the coroner's office, having conversations with the media, and learning about one another, showing each other that, you know, we're all humans at the end of the day and we all want the best for this world. And for that, I'm very thankful.
Chelsea, yesterday you said it wasn't just the fault of one person, one agency, why this tragedy happened. Today you're talking about being a very forgiving person, your community is very forgiving. Is forgiveness something that you have right now or are looking for after this inquest? Is that something you think you could ever get to?
Absolutely. I think I've always had forgiveness, but I think Indigenous people always have forgiveness. And you see it in our communities every day. You see it here. We've had some heated conversations here ourselves, and we walk into a room and do ceremony together, and we put our best feet forward. But also, I want it to be said that Canadians are learning from Indigenous people. You're learning about your own systems that impact you. But you're learning from Indigenous people, you're learning from our issues, you're learning about an inquest process. And we also recognize that the jury, they're bound by guidelines as well. And I'm sure that there was many more recommendations that they wanted to give, but they're bound by it being practical, implementable, and lawful based on the evidence given. And I don't doubt that there was more that they wish they could have given, but we are thankful for what we've received.
You know, I think one of the conversations that you've also said is over time that you want these to have teeth. What do you see down the road for accountability? Do you want updates, regular updates? Obviously you will get a coroner's response to what each department thinks,
Yeah.
but long-term, 5 years down the road, what do you want to be hearing?
Absolutely. We talked about this together as a families withstanding, that these recommendations don't just stay on paper. Everything can look good on paper, but what really matters is that we see the action in our agencies, in our communities. And I just wanted, the coroner's office has vocalized and stressed that they will work closely with us to keep us updated on these recommendations. And we will continue to take alternative measures to push what is needed in our communities.
One of the questions that was asked when we were previewing the recommendations was, are you disappointed by any of the recommendations? And I said, no, we're not disappointed by recommendations. The recommendations were good. But in 5 years' time, if there's no action to the recommendations, then we're going to be disappointed. But right now, we're feeling very hopeful. But in time, I hope that feeling doesn't go away with the inaction of our governments. So,
Is this process going to be enough for you, or would you maybe like something more to happen, such as a national inquiry?
well, again, we're speaking to such a small group. I don't know if it's a small group, but we're talking to the world. And we need to keep on talking to the world. We need to keep raising awareness to the issues that we're facing. So if it needs to go to a national inquiry, well, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah.
We need to keep on raising awareness for our people.
But I think it's important that people remember that, sure, we can have a national inquiry, but a lot of these issues can start at our kitchen tables. Go back into your homes and your communities, talk to your friends, your relatives, and make them aware of these issues that impact all of us. So it doesn't just happen to an Indigenous community, it could happen to any community.
Okay.